Welcome to NTD China News. I'm Karen Chang. Making headlines this Thursday, February 28th. China says it's been the victim of hacking from the US. Who's likely to be China's next foreign minister? And concerns over China's management of a port in Pakistan. The Chinese regime said today it has been the victim of hacking from the US. A Defense Ministry statement says its own website and an army website were attacked about 144,000 times per month last year. Ministry spokesman Geng Yansheng claimed IP address tracking showed that almost two-thirds originated in the US. China's Defense Ministry had previously claimed that IP tracking was unreliable to identify the source of hacking. That was when the ministry denied allegations made by US internet security company Mandiant that said a Chinese military unit was behind large numbers of hacking in the US. China's counterclaims over hacking came during a monthly Defense Ministry press conference. According to Reuters, foreign reporters were not allowed to attend, and the statement was posted on the Defense Ministry's website. China continues to call for a moderate response to North Korea's latest nuclear test. This is despite North Korea threatening South Korea with final destruction just last week. China's Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hua Chunying made the announcement earlier today. Although China has supported UN sanctions against North Korea, it has worked hard to water them down. China is North Korea's biggest trading partner and ally. If North Korea collapses, it will lose its communist ally and face a flood of refugees. For North Korea's part, it says that tensions on the Korean peninsula are to be blamed on the US. North Korea carried out its third nuclear test on February 12th, going against UN resolutions. It says the tests are in reaction to hostile US policies. And with China's border relations being put to the test, some are reporting a man with expertise on North Korea and Japan ties could be the next foreign minister as the Chinese regime finalizes its leadership transition next month.
China will most likely appoint Wang as its next foreign minister during the annual parliament session next month. Wang is an expert on Japan and North Korea, and Beijing's decision implies China is considering Sino-Japanese relations important of all issues. China and Japan have been involved in a heated dispute over the ownership of the Diaoyu Islands in the East China Sea since last year. Relationships between the two nations have become tense, and fears of a military confrontation are also growing over the conflict. Wang served as China's ambassador to Japan from 2004 to 2007. He was also counselor and later minister counselor at Chinese embassy in Tokyo from 1989 to 1994. Beijing sees Wang's expertise in Japanese matters and his contacts in Japanese business and political circles helpful to improve its relations with Japan. Wang was also China's representative to six-party talks from 2007 to 2008 to curb North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Wang is currently director of China's Taiwan Affairs Division. He will replace current Foreign Minister Yang Jiechi after being formally appointed next month.
As China's economy grows, so does its need for energy. It is pursuing a quicker route to oil in the Middle East, or is it? Some speculate the latest role in Pakistan may be for more than just oil.
On February 18th, the Pakistani government transferred the management of its deep-sea Gwadar port to a Chinese state-owned company. This raised concerns with India's defense minister that the Chinese regime was developing a military presence in the area. China's ambassador to Pakistan dismissed this, insisting the move was only for economic purposes. But India's concern highlights China's growing influence in the area and fear that China could be trying to counter Western influences.
China and India are adversaries along the border. In fact, it actively supports Pakistan. China's presence in this region has caused strong vigilance in India. Western countries will continue to observe China's strategic intent.
Pakistan borders India, and the Gwadar port is one of 3 deep-water ports on the Pakistani coastline. It's not operational yet, but once built, the port could make available to 20% of the world's oil. China provided around $200 million, or 3/4 of the initial investment to build the port, but management of it was given to the Port of Singapore Authority. The Singaporean management failed to develop it according to plan, and it has lain dormant since last November. Now, with China's state-run overseas port holding company taking over management, it will not only provide Pakistan's cash-strapped government with much-needed revenue, but help the Chinese regime establish presence in the region.
And coming up after the break, China's government debt and growth prospects. Hong Kong lawmakers speak out after a break-in attempt at the Epoch Times newspaper print shop. And a global group of doctors and investigators get a taste of Chinese culture in Taiwan. And welcome back. For over a decade, local governments in China have relied on borrowing money to invest in infrastructure development. This has contributed to high economic growth figures, but the high borrowing model isn't sustainable long-term, and now cracks are starting to appear.
China's lurking debt problem could mean a lowered growth output for this year. Bloomberg News reported today that almost half of Chinese provinces have announced a reduced GDP target. It cited Nomura Holdings Inc. as saying that 14 provinces now expect a lower growth target than last year. 17 provinces kept the same target. Local governments in China have traditionally relied on infrastructure investment to prop up economic growth, and this has largely been done through borrowing. According to this Wall Street Journal opinion piece by Ruchir Sharma, the head of emerging markets at Morgan Stanley Investment Management, the amount of new loans in China has quadrupled since 2007 to $2.75 trillion in the 12 months before January this year. The ratio of public and private debt is now more than 200% of GDP. The problem with ballooning government debt is that they will not be repaid. While infrastructure investment can produce impressive GDP figures, roads and bridges yield little economic return. According to the Financial Times, Chinese banks rescheduled at least 3/4 of loans to local governments meant to be due by the end of 2012. China's own regulators have expressed concerns over rising local government debt. Earlier this month, Finance Minister Xie Xuren said authorities would introduce tougher controls on budgeting and irresponsible spending.
NTD's partner media, the Epoch Times, faced a break-in attempt last weekend in Hong Kong. While nothing was stolen or damaged, the break-in did raise some concerns. Some fear this was an attempt to intimidate media that is critical of China's Communist Party.
The printing house of the Epoch Times daily newspaper in Hong Kong saw a break-in attempt on Saturday. The Epoch Times is one of NTD's partner medias. The lock on the front gate looked as if it had been tampered with, and security camera footage showed 3 people trying to force open the door. They were not successful, but the shop's supervisor says it isn't reassuring. This is the 3rd break-in attempt in the last 5 months. Now Hong Kong legislators are calling on the Hong Kong government to act.
I think the Hong Kong government should seriously enforce the law. They must not condone those thugs.
Huo points out that the intruder's behavior is similar to that of a pro-communist organization called the Hong Kong Youth Care Association.
Today's attackers were masked. We're not sure who they were related to, but their actions is very similar to what Hong Kong Youth Care Association has done. Therefore, we are very, very angry.
The association's official mission is to help the poor and elderly by providing everyday services. But in reality, the group mostly blocks the anti-persecution efforts of the practitioners of the Falun Gong spiritual practice. The Epoch Times has consistently reported on the over a decade-long persecution of Falun Gong in China.
The Epoch Times is a big threat to the Communist Party because the paper is daily and it points out the Communist Party's problems every day. It's such a big pressure on the Communist Party, so it took its actions to damage the paper.
Hong Kong citizens have become worried that the region is not as independent as it once was. Hong Kong's current leader, Leung Chun-ying, has been accused of being a pawn for the mainland government. Legislative Council member Wang says this case is just another example of communist influence.
He not only takes advantage of public authority, including police and other law enforcement, but uses the Communist Party's perpetual agencies to repress us.
The Epoch Times newspaper has reported on issues in the mainland that have been censored by Chinese state media. While Hong Kong has maintained a certain amount of autonomy from the mainland, it is not immune to its influence. The security company that manages the Epoch Times print shop plans to reinforce security in the building.
China leads the world in many areas, but you might be surprised to learn it's also the safest country on earth. That's at least what China's Ministry of Public Security seems to be saying. But people throughout the country with their own experiences say something different.
There's safety in numbers, and with 1.3 billion people, China must be the safest place on earth. At least that's what the Ministry of Public Security seems to think. On Tuesday, state-run People's Daily posted new statistics from the ministry that say murders, assault, and robbery have dropped in recent years. So much so that the rates of these crimes are lower than that of Switzerland or Japan, considered two of the safest countries in the world. Police also claim they successfully finalized almost 95% of murder investigations. Many Chinese citizens were quick to lambast the report as propaganda and lies. Evidence seems to suggest that crime rates would be much higher, but police mostly ignore reports. Guangzhou-based human rights lawyer Tang Jingling told NTD that funeral parlors there burn several hundred unidentified corpses each year, and there's rarely an investigation into where those corpses come from.
In China, a lot of cases have not been placed on file for investigation. I personally have experienced several cases myself, and my brothers and sisters have too. They have encountered this before. Many criminal cases haven't been filed.
Some also questioned whether justice is really carried out by law enforcement. The country is known for having large numbers of prisoners of conscience as well as unofficial detention centers.
When they open black jails, this means people are illegally deprived from freedom. This is what they call crime cases. Do they file these cases? Is there a criminal offense? Actually, crime rates in China are certainly much higher than in Japan and other countries.
Activist Guo Yongfeng says public security officials are more concerned with carrying out orders from central authorities rather than protecting the public.
They spend a lot of time in stability maintenance to keep the Communist Party's one-party dictatorship. They do not take into account people's livelihood and don't even care about the murder cases. This is because they have neither the financial resources nor the manpower for this.
The report by the Ministry of Public Security comes close on the heels of promises by Chinese leader Xi Jinping to stamp out corruption within the party, as well as calls for greater open criticism of the party by the public.
This week, we've been reporting about a group of doctors and investigators from around the world visiting Taiwan to raise awareness of forced organ harvesting in China. While during their trip, they took one evening to watch a performance by Shen Yun Performing Arts, something they said offered a sense of positivity and hope for China's future.
A group of medical experts from around the world saw Shen Yun Performing Arts at the Dr. Sun Yat-sen Memorial Hall in Taipei this week. They are in Taiwan to speak against transplant tourism and forced organ harvesting in mainland China. Amidst their efforts to promote China's human rights, they came to experience the beauty of Chinese culture.
I think the beautiful combination of watching the beautiful culture of old China, both by the dancers and by the musicians, together with reacting the horrifying story of the Falun Dafa, I think this group has done a remarkable job.
Dr. Lavi is a contributor to the book State Organs, Transplant Abuse in China. He first learnt about illegal transplant practices in China from patients in Israel who received organs in China with extremely short waiting times. He has since helped to pass a law in Israel to ban the sale and brokerage of organs. It also stops medical insurance payments for Israeli nationals who receive transplants in China. Despite his awareness of the rights abuses that happen in China, Dr. Lavi felt hopeful for China's future after seeing Shen Yun.
And the way they have depicted it here really touched my heart. So on top of this, I mean, the beautiful end piece, with the optimistic way about the future of China, I think it was a remarkable evening.
Malaysian physician Dr. Ghazali Ahmad and his wife are in Taiwan for the same reason as Dr. Lavi. They too shared feelings of peacefulness and hope.
We belong to the same group of people called humans. And we must have come from one similar and the same creator. And we only, as all we know, have one planet that has oxygen, that we all live together. The show represented something that has been there for thousands of years. If this came from China, and yet the people in mainland China cannot have access to this in a free manner, that is something it's very sad.
The doctors met with Taiwan's legal and medical communities, joining a forum against transplant tourism on Thursday, February 28th. Shen Yun Performing Arts has finished its shows in Taipei and will be in southern Taiwan's Kaohsiung City until March 5th.
And that's all for this broadcast of NTD China News. For more on China-related topics, visit our website at ntd.tv or subscribe to our YouTube channel, NTD on China. Coming up next is China Focus with Shali Zhang. She speaks with Matt Gnesta about forced organ harvesting in China.